My name is Jenna Waters, and I'm 36 years old. As I sip lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug in the tiny kitchenette of my rented studio apartment, I'm trying to keep my hands from shaking. They always do this when I'm angry, furious, actually, but I can't afford to replace the mug, so I breathe through it. 2 weeks ago, my brother Adam stood in front of 120 guests at a fundraising gala and announced my bankruptcy. He said it like he was giving a toast. To family resilience, he declared, champagne in hand, even when some of us have fallen on hard times. Then came the punchline. Jenna always was more of a dreamer than a doer. But don't worry, we're taking care of her.
People laughed.
A few gasped. I smiled through it like it was a joke I'd already heard 100 times. Because that's what I do, I smile. I swallow the bitter pill and let it dissolve in silence. That's how I survived our family dinners, our childhood, our very public failures. But what no one knew, not Adam, not his smug wife Lana, not even my estranged mother Judith sitting at table 3 in her statement pearls, is that while Adam was publicly humiliating me, I had already done the unthinkable. I had just closed on the one thing my sister-in-law Lana had wanted more than anything in the world, her dream house. The blue Victorian on Willow Lane. The one with the wraparound porch, bay windows, and the white rose arbor she'd posted about endlessly for years. She'd cried when it went on the market. Told Adam it was destiny. He promised her they'd make an offer. But I beat them to it. And I paid in cash. Before I explain how that happened and why I did it, let me take you back because you need to understand who Adam is, who we are, and why buying that house wasn't just a petty act of revenge. It was survival. Adam is 4 years older than me. He's the kind of man people admire instantly. He knows how to work a room, close a deal, charm a waitress and a judge in the same afternoon. Tall, square-jawed, impeccably dressed. The type who doesn't just wear confidence, he weaponizes it. Growing up, he was the golden child. First to walk, first to speak, valedictorian, quarterback, early acceptance to Princeton. My mother called him our legacy. She used to say it like a prayer. Adam is our legacy. He'll put this family on the map. I, on the other hand, was the artist. Quiet, bookish, emotional. I'd draw for hours in the attic with my headphones on, pretending the floorboards were a raft, and I was drifting away. My report cards always said the same thing. Jenna shows promise but needs to apply herself. Mom hated that. Judith was a career attorney turned socialite. After my father left us when I was 10, ran off with his assistant and never looked back, she doubled down on appearances. We rise above, she'd say, whenever anything got messy. We don't air laundry. We host luncheons. Adam fit neatly into her world. I never did. When I got into art school, she didn't come to my portfolio exhibition. I have a fundraiser, she said. Surely you understand. When I moved to New York, lived with 3 roommates, and worked nights at a gallery while painting during the day, she called it playing pretend. You can't build a life on brushstrokes, Jenna, she warned. But I tried. I tried so hard. After college, I landed a job as an illustrator for a small publishing house. Nothing glamorous, but steady. I took on freelance work. I lived frugally. No designer shoes, no avocado toast, just rent, ramen, and dreams. And then came the diagnosis. Stage 2 breast cancer. I was 31. I'll spare you the gory details, but chemo doesn't just drain your body, it empties your bank account. Between the medical bills, lost work, and months of being too weak to hold a pencil, my financial foundation crumbled. I asked for help exactly once. I remember calling Adam. My pride tasted like metal in my throat. Just until I'm back on my feet, I told him. A short loan. He paused. Lana and I are doing IVF, he said. It's not cheap. And honestly, Jenna, maybe it's time you reconsidered this whole art thing. That was it. No loan. No lifeline. But I survived anyway. I always do. The bankruptcy filing happened 6 months ago. Quiet, clinical. I wore sunglasses to the courthouse and walked out numb. I didn't tell anyone, not even my best friend Kara, because admitting it felt like failure. Like confirming everything they'd always believed about me. that I was a dreamer, that I couldn't handle the real world. But a strange thing happened once I hit rock bottom. I started to rebuild. Secretly, quietly, obsessively. I sold everything that wasn't essential. My paintings, my antique record collection, even the jewelry I'd inherited from my grandmother. I moved into this cramped studio apartment in a rougher part of town. I took every commission that came my way, children's book illustrations, pet portraits, even graphic novel panels. Then something wild happened. A book I illustrated went viral. Clara the Courageous Cat. Overnight, I was everywhere. Instagram tags. Teachers sharing classroom readings. Publishers offering deals. Licensing revenues started pouring in. Foreign editions, stuffed toys, animated short rights. And for once, I didn't tell anyone, not even Kara. I kept my name out of the press as much as I could. Used my business alias, J.W. Parker. Let them all think I was broke. Let Adam mock me. Let Lana sneer. Because I had a plan. And the plan involved that house on Willow Lane. It came on the market 3 months ago. Listed by the same real estate agent Lana follows religiously. She posted a story on Instagram that day, tagging Adam with hearts and house emojis. "This is it," she gushed. And I knew. I called the agent using a burner phone, scheduled a private showing, and walked through that house like I'd always belonged. The hardwood floors. The original fireplace. The clawfoot tub. It wasn't just Lana's dream house. It was mine too once. I used to draw it as a child, the fantasy home I'd escaped to when Judith was on a rampage or Adam was mocking me. I bought it 3 weeks later. Cash. No mortgage. No trail. And when Adam stood on that ballroom stage, laughing at my poor choices, I had already signed the deed. But I didn't do it to get back at him. Not really. I did it because I wanted one thing, one moment of power, where I wasn't the failure, the charity case, the embarrassment. I wanted to prove, to myself, that I could win without anyone's help. And I had. But what came next, I hadn't expected. Because secrets, especially the kind wrapped in hardwood and crown molding, don't stay buried forever. I didn't intend to keep the house a secret forever. Just for a while. At first, I told myself it was about timing. I'd reveal it once the renovations were done. Once I'd furnished it the way I'd always imagined. Once I'd painted every room with light and silence and peace, the things I'd craved my entire life. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was scared. Not scared of losing it. No, that fear was long gone. I'd paid for every inch of that house myself. But I was scared of what it meant. Scared that claiming something that beautiful, something so Lana's, would change me into someone I didn't recognize. Someone bold. Someone unapologetic. Someone like Adam. And yet, every time I turned the key in that antique brass lock and stepped onto those creaky hardwood floors, I felt something loosen in my chest. A knot I hadn't realized I'd been carrying since I was 10 years old. Since the day I watched my father drive away, without looking back. That house, my house, was freedom. The first night I slept there were no curtains on the windows, no furniture except for a mattress on the floor and my grandmother's quilt. I lay there in the moonlight, listening to the wind rustling the trees out back, and for the first time in years, I felt safe. I fell asleep smiling. A week later, I spotted Lana's car parked across the street. I almost didn't recognize it at first, sleek, metallic blue, always polished to perfection. I peered out through a crack in the cardboard I'd temporarily taped over one of the front windows. There she was, sitting behind the wheel, dark glasses covering her face, her phone in one hand. She didn't get out, just stared. I knew what she was doing. She was watching her dream house slip away. I don't know how she found out I'd bought it. Maybe she overheard something. Maybe one of her realtor friends ran a property record search. Maybe, in that eerie, sixth sense way that controlling people operate, she just felt it. Regardless, I knew that look. It was the same look Judith used to give me when I'd sneak a second cookie after dinner or wear jeans to Easter service instead of a dress. That look that said, "How dare you?" Except this time, I didn't shrink from it. This time, I made tea turned on my jazz playlist, and let her sit outside in silence. 3 days later, the war began. It started subtly. Passive-aggressive texts from Adam. "Hey, heard you're back in the suburbs. Must be rough giving up your downtown lifestyle." As if I'd ever had one. Then came the email. A thinly veiled offer from Adam's investment firm. Saw a recent property transfer. Willow Lane's a great area. If you ever need help managing that investment, rental income, flip potential, we'd love to represent you. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my mug. Managing it? They thought I was going to sell or lease the place. That it was some accidental acquisition?
No.
I bought it for me. For the girl who used to draw it in the margins of her math homework. For the woman who fought her way back from cancer and bankruptcy with a paintbrush and grit. But I said none of that. I replied, "Thanks, but I'm all set." Smiley face. The smiley face was just petty enough. Then, of course, came Judith. My mother hadn't spoken to me directly since the gala. Not after Adam's little announcement. But I knew that silence wouldn't last. Sure enough, a few days after Lana's surveillance session, I got an invitation. Sunday brunch at the Hartwell Country Club. Formal attire. RSVP to Judith. It wasn't even subtle. I debated whether to go. Every instinct in me screamed no. Protect your peace. Stay home. Enjoy your hard-won solitude. But something else tugged at me too. Curiosity? A thirst for closure? Or maybe I just wanted to look her in the eye and see if there was anything left behind the armor. So I went. I wore a vintage floral dress that made me feel powerful and absolutely refused to put my hair in the bun she always criticized as too messy. The brunch was, as expected, insufferable. Judith sat at the head of the long table like a queen conducting court. Everything was perfectly arranged. Mini quiches, champagne flutes, cloth napkins in swan shapes. Heather, my cousin, was already half drunk and gossiping about her Pilates instructor's affair. Adam was there too, of course. He raised an eyebrow when he saw me. "Well," he said, smirking. "Look who survived bankruptcy." I smiled sweetly. Some of us are harder to kill than others. Judith's gaze swept over me like a scanner. Jenna. Always dramatic. "I'm here for the eggs," I said, folding my napkin carefully. "Not the family theater." The conversation turned stilted after that. I didn't engage. I sipped my mimosa and let their small talk wash over me like static. And then, midway through the salmon croquettes, Judith pounced. "I heard you've been spending time on Willow Lane," she said, voice smooth but sharp. Adam leaned in, intrigued. "Really? That place Lana wanted just went off the market." I met her eyes directly.
Yes.
I bought it. Silence fell like a dropped plate. Lana, who joined late and was sitting opposite me in oversized sunglasses, froze mid-sip. Her hand trembled just enough to send a ripple through her drink. Judith's smile didn't falter, but her eyes went cold. "How ambitious of you." "I thought so," I said, letting the edge into my tone now. Felt like it was finally time to invest in myself. Adam recovered quickly. "Didn't realize you were back on your feet so fast." "Well," I said, setting down my glass, "when you're not funneling your money into ego-driven startups or designer strollers, you'd be surprised what you can save." Judith cleared her throat. "We always hoped you'd grow out of this rebellious phase." I leaned forward just enough to make them uncomfortable. "This isn't rebellion," I said quietly. "It's liberation." And with that, I stood, smoothed my dress, and left the brunch without looking back. As I walked out into the sunshine, I felt lighter. Something had shifted. Something permanent. They could whisper, plot, speculate, but the deed was mine. The house was mine. And for the first time in my life, I had nothing to prove to anyone. But of course, with people like my family, silence isn't the end. It's just the beginning of the next move. And I knew Adam wasn't finished. I didn't hear from Adam for almost a week after the brunch. Which, in our family, is suspicious. Silence is never silence. It's a storm cloud circling just out of sight. Still, I wasn't prepared for what came next. It started with a knock on the door. Not my studio apartment, the house. My house. I'd just finished painting the second guest room, a soft misty gray that reminded me of rainy mornings in Paris. I had a paintbrush in one hand and a playlist of 90s indie rock humming through the Bluetooth speaker. When I opened the door, I still had a streak of paint on my cheek. The man standing there wore a tailored suit, sunglasses, and a practiced smile. Realtor.
Slick.
Ms. Waters.
I nodded, wary.
I'm Bryce Thomas from Luxon Realty. I represent a highly interested party who would like to make you a generous cash offer on this property. Sight unseen. I blinked. It's not for sale. He barely paused. They're prepared to go 20% over asking. Close in 10 days. No contingencies. I folded my arms, the paintbrush dripping slightly onto the porch. Tell Adam he'll need to learn a new trick. This one's tired. His smile faltered. Excuse me? I took a step forward. You're working for my brother, right? Adam Waters? Blonde hair, Wall Street arrogance, levs on spite and protein shakes. The guy had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. I'm not at liberty to say who. Then you can tell your mystery client that this house isn't on the market. Won't be. Ever. I shut the door before he could respond. Standing in the foyer, heart pounding, I let the silence soak in. That wasn't just a real estate inquiry, that was a threat disguised as a bribe. It was Adam trying to undo my win, buy back the power he'd lost the moment I signed that deed. I laughed. I couldn't help it.
He still didn't get it.
To him, everything had a price. But this house? This life I'd rebuilt? It wasn't a transaction. It was redemption. Later that evening, I called Kara, finally. I'd been avoiding her ever since the bankruptcy hearing. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I couldn't stand to say it out loud. Failure. Again. She answered on the second ring. Jenna, you're alive? I winced. Barely.
Don't joke.
You ghosted me for 3 months. I was about to file a missing persons report. I'm sorry, I said, genuinely. Things got complicated. Complicated like Adam slandering you in front of half the city at that fundraiser? Or complicated like you secretly buying a house he and Lana were drooling over for years? I blinked. How do you know about that? I have Instagram, Jenna. Lana posted a not-so-cryptic story last night, some moody song lyrics and a picture of a for sale sign being taken down. The caption was, "When your dream gets stolen by someone else's drama." It was basically a passive-aggressive sonnet. I groaned. I should have warned you, Kara said, voice softening. People like them? They don't lose gracefully. I know. There was a pause.
Then, so.
Tell me everything. And I mean everything. For the first time in months, I let the floodgates open. I told her about the bankruptcy, the children's book deal, the secret income, the house, the realtor stunt. I left nothing out. When I finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. Holy
Shit.
yeah, you're kind of my hero. I laughed, surprised at the lump forming in my throat. I mean it, she said. They tried to bury you, and you came back with a deed and a paintbrush. I'm still figuring it out, I admitted. I don't know what comes next. You live in your dream house. You paint your walls. You build a life they don't get to touch. She paused. And also, you let me come over next weekend for wine and a tour, because I need to sit in this story and soak up every inch of poetic justice.
Deal.
After we hung up, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine and watched the neighborhood lights flicker on. Willow Lane was quiet, almost unnervingly so. But I liked it. It didn't demand anything from me. The stars were just beginning to prick through the darkening sky when my phone buzzed. A message from Adam. We need to talk. Tomorrow.
Noon.
Bring your lawyer if you've finally managed to afford one. No explanation. No greeting. Just typical Adam bravado. I considered ignoring it. I should have ignored it. But something in me, curiosity, defiance, maybe both, said go. So, the next day, I did. He chose a boutique coffee shop in Midtown, one of those sleek places where the menu doesn't include prices and the baristas look like off-duty models. He was already seated when I arrived, tapping his Rolex and sipping something overpriced. You're late, he said. Noon means noon, I replied, settling into the chair across from him.
So,
Let's talk. He leaned back, assessing me like I was a stock he couldn't quite value. You blindsided Lana. She's a big girl. She'll survive. You're playing a dangerous game, Jenna. And you're not used to losing. Get to the point. His jaw clenched, then relaxed. You embarrassed me. That made me laugh, and I didn't even try to hide it. Oh, Adam. You humiliated me in front of a ballroom full of strangers. What's one bruised ego between siblings? He leaned in. You don't get it. That house wasn't just a house. It was a promise. To my wife. To our family. And I'm not allowed to have dreams, is that it? Only you get castles? He said nothing. I lowered my voice. You thought I was broken. You wanted me to stay broken. Because it made you feel powerful. His eyes darkened. You don't know what power is. I smiled.
no, Adam.
You don't. I stood, leaving my untouched coffee behind. As I walked out, I felt his eyes burning into my back. And that's when I knew. This wasn't over. Adam wasn't going to stop until he won. But neither was I. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake in my new bedroom. Bare walls, open windows, the distant hoot of an owl the only sound in the stillness. The mattress was comfortable, the air was cool, and yet my thoughts buzzed like an electric wire. Adam's face across that cafe table, his tone, that venom disguised as calm. You embarrassed me. As if that was the real crime. Not his public betrayal. Not announcing my financial hardship like he was unveiling a PowerPoint at a networking event. No, it was the fact that I'd refused to stay small. That I had dared to outmaneuver him without permission. I stared up at the ceiling and said it aloud, like a mantra. He's not going to take this lying down. The next morning, the knock came early. 7:12 a.m., to be exact. I wasn't surprised this time. I pulled on a robe, tied my hair up in a knot, and opened the door to find a woman standing there in a crisp navy skirt suit and carrying a thick manila envelope. Jenna Waters? She asked. Yes. She handed it to me. You've been served. Before I could respond, she turned and walked briskly down the front path to her car. I stood there for a moment, stunned. Then I opened the envelope. A lawsuit. From Adam. Alleging fraudulent acquisition of property. It read like a bad novel. Accusations of intentional emotional distress, sabotage of a contract in progress, and my personal favorite, malicious interference with familial estate goals. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Familial estate goals? Was that what Lana's Pinterest board was officially called? The document ended with a demand. Either relinquish the property voluntarily or face court proceedings. He was really doing this. My own brother was suing me. Kara came over an hour later, still in yoga pants and with her toddler's cereal stuck to her hoodie. I brought muffins, she said, marching in. And legal rage. I handed her the envelope. She read it in silence, her brow furrowing, eyes widening, lips curling in disgust. Oh, hell no. I know. This is delusional. Welcome to my bloodline. She glanced around the living room, where the furniture still consisted of a second-hand couch, a coffee table from Craigslist, and an armchair I'd found on the curb and reupholstered myself. You don't even have a dining table yet, Jenna. He's acting like you burned down his wing of the estate. I sat down on the armrest of the couch, legs bouncing. I knew he'd retaliate, but this is war. Later that afternoon, I called a lawyer. A real one. Not a friend of a friend, not a family friend. I found someone completely detached from the social circles Adam and Judith slithered through. Her name was Elisa Tran. She ran her practice out of a modest office above a vegan bakery. Mid-40s, no nonsense. Almond eyes that seemed to see right through the games. She read the paperwork, adjusted her glasses, and said, "He doesn't have a case." That was it. I blinked. What? She pointed to the highlighted sections. This reads like a temper tantrum. There's no legal basis. You made a private purchase. There was no contractual obligation between him and the seller. The only thing he's proven here is that he's petty and rich enough to throw legal grenades when he doesn't get his way. I stared at her. So, you think I'll win? She leaned back in her chair. Oh, you've already won. Now it's just about making sure he doesn't waste your time or drain your energy. Her calm was contagious. I exhaled. And then she said something I wasn't expecting. Do you want to fight back? I thought I was. No, I mean, publicly. I blinked. What do you mean? People like Adam thrive on perception. His power isn't just money, it's the illusion of control. The minute you break that illusion, you take away the thing he values most. I nodded slowly. I want to fight. Then we do it smart. We don't just defend, we expose. I walked out of her office feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Conviction. Not the desperate kind that clings to survival. The quiet, anchored kind. The kind that doesn't care who's watching. That weekend, I started documenting everything. Emails, texts, voice memos, screenshots. Every nasty message, every shady move, every time Adam or Judith had used their status to try and shame me into silence.
Kara helped.
She was brilliant at tech stuff, and her righteous fury made her unstoppable. We compiled everything into a folder. We named it Project Willow. A few days later, I got an invitation to a charity luncheon hosted by Judith, a breast cancer awareness fundraiser. The irony nearly knocked me over. I'd been through chemo alone, lost my hair, my income, my dignity. I remembered sitting in a bathroom stall at the oncology clinic crying over a declined debit card. Judith hadn't visited once. But now she was playing hostess at a pink and white brunch for social media clout. I RSVP'd yes. Kara's jaw dropped. You're going to that viper nest? I'm not going for them, I said. I'm going for me. And I was. I wore a simple black jumpsuit, tailored, strong, not girlish or soft. I pinned my hair back and wore my grandmother's brooch on my lapel. The luncheon was held in a glass-ceiling atrium. Tables decorated in rose gold, women in pale pink chiffon sipping rose and comparing Botox appointments. Judith saw me before I saw her. She stiffened, then smiled. Her politician smile. Jenna, she said, gliding over. You look well. I smiled back. I do, don't I? She leaned in, voice low. Why are you here? Because I survived. And I thought that's what this event was about. Before she could respond, the event coordinator tapped a microphone. We'd like to start today's luncheon with a short testimonial from a survivor in our community. I didn't know who it would be. I didn't ask. But when they called my name, I wasn't shocked. I stood, walked slowly to the front, and I told the truth. Not the shiny version. Not the sanitized, pre-approved one Judith would have preferred. I told them about the diagnosis, the financial ruin, the loneliness, the betrayal, and then the rebuilding, the book deal, the house, the lawsuit. I didn't name Adam. I didn't have to. I just said sometimes the people closest to you hurt you the most. And surviving isn't just about healing your body. It's about learning to live again without asking for permission. When I finished, the room was silent. And then applause. Real, bone deep, no PR team applause. As I walked back to my seat, Judith's face was white with rage. I sat, sipped my rose, and smiled. Because this time, they saw me. Not the failure. Not the footnote in Adam's perfect world.
Me.
And I wasn't going anywhere. The video went viral within 24 hours. Not because I posted it, someone from the luncheon did. A woman I'd never met, named Elise, tagged it, #RealSurvivorStory, and uploaded a clip of my speech on her Instagram. The caption read, "Raw, honest,
Brave.
We need more of this and less of the curated perfection we pretend to live." Within hours, the views soared. First a few thousand, then 50, then over 100,000. My inbox filled with messages. Women who had battled illness alone. Freelancers who'd clawed their way back from ruin. Sisters. Daughters. Strangers who saw themselves in my story. And then came the media request. A lifestyle blog wanted to feature me. From bankruptcy to bestseller, the real story behind Clara the Courageous Cat. They offered an honorarium, photo shoot, and a byline. I almost declined. It felt dangerous. Too exposed. But then I thought of Adam and his lawsuit, Judith and her staged charity brunch, Lana and her hashtag blessed posts about healing crystals and affirmation journals. And I said yes. The article came out the following week. The headline was striking. She was written off. Then she bought the house her family wanted. They included pictures of me in the house, me barefoot in the foyer, sitting cross-legged on the porch, hands dipped in paint in the upstairs hallway. Real moments. No glamour shots. Just life. And the world loved it. They weren't rooting for perfection. They were rooting for real. The piece went viral too. And suddenly, the story Adam had tried to shape, Jenna the financial failure, was unraveling in public. He called the next morning. "Take it down," he snapped, skipping any kind of hello. "I didn't post it," I said, calm. "And even if I had, what exactly would I be taking down? My truth. You're embarrassing the family." "No, Adam. You did that when you announced my bankruptcy over canapes." There was a pause. "Then, you're playing dirty. You sued me. I was provoked. And now you're losing control of the narrative. That's what this is really about, isn't it?" He didn't answer. But silence was an answer too. That night, I stood in the kitchen of my house, my kitchen, and looked around. The floors were scuffed. The cabinets needed refinishing. There was a chipped tile in the backsplash and no dishwasher yet. But it was mine. All of it. I opened a bottle of wine, poured myself a glass, and toasted the quiet. And then my phone rang. It was Judith. For the first time in nearly 4 months. I stared at her name for a long moment, thumb hovering. Then I answered. "Hello, Mother." There was a beat of silence on the other end. Then, "So, this is what it's come to?" I didn't say anything. "You airing our family dysfunction for the world? Making a spectacle?" "It's not a spectacle," I said. "It's a survival story. You humiliated your brother. You've made me look like some neglectful tyrant." "I didn't have to make you look like anything," I replied, steady. "You did that all on your own." Her voice sharpened. "Your father would be appalled." I nearly laughed. "Dad left when I was 10 and never looked back. Let's not pretend he was some pillar of virtue. You were always difficult, Jenna. Always so emotional. And you were always so conditional." She sucked in a breath. I pressed on. "You loved me when I performed the way you wanted. When I colored inside your lines. The minute I strayed, I was an embarrassment. An inconvenience. A phase you couldn't wait for me to grow out of. I supported you. You supported Adam. I cut in. You showed up for him. For me, you offered strings."
Guilt.
Silence when I needed help, and judgment when I asked for it. There was a long pause. Then softly, "And yet here we are." "Yes," I said. "Here we are. Your article made the rounds at the club." "I'm sure it did." A few women said they cried. I didn't answer. Judith's voice wavered, just slightly. "I don't cry easily, Jenna. You know that." And suddenly, I realized something that stunned me. She was trying. In her own broken, rigid way, she was trying to reach across the chasm she'd spent years building. But I wasn't ready to meet her there.
Not yet.
"I have to go," I said, gently but firmly. "Thanks for calling." I hung up before she could respond. The next day, Elisa, my lawyer, called. "I have news. Good or bad?" "Both." "Hit me." "The good, Adam's case is falling apart. No judge will touch it. His lawyers are quietly backing away. And the bad, he's digging elsewhere." "Meaning?"
She sighed.
"He's requesting a financial audit. Looking for any loophole. Claims you used illicit earnings to buy the house." I laughed. "My catbook money is illicit now."
He's desperate, Jenna.
You embarrassed him. And now he's not just angry, he's dangerous." I nodded slowly. "Then let him dig. There's nothing to find." But part of me still braced. Because I knew Adam. He wasn't just looking for proof. He was looking for destruction. Kara and I doubled down on Project Willow. We organized everything: proof of payment, earnings, contracts, copyright licenses. We printed receipts, made spreadsheets, color-coded folders. If he wanted a war, I would give him documentation so airtight it could smother his ego on arrival. Then came the kicker. A message from Lana. Just meet me
Tomorrow, 6 p.m.
at the house. My heart thumped. She knew.
She wanted to see it.
I should have ignored it, but my curiosity outweighed my sense. I texted back one word. Fine. At exactly 6, she arrived. Her car, of course, gleamed. Her heels clicked dramatically on the front porch. She wore a beige wrap coat and dark glasses, like she was auditioning for a divorce-themed soap opera. I opened the door and stepped aside. She looked past me into the house, said nothing for a long time. Then she walked in. She said, "It smells like paint and poverty." I smiled. Better than bleach and Botox. We stood in silence in the foyer, the hardwood floors creaking softly beneath us. "This was supposed to be mine," she said finally. I shrugged. "Then you should have bought it faster." Adam and I were lining up financing. "I didn't need financing." She flinched. "You're proud of that," she said quietly. "Of course I am." She turned to face me then, finally really looking at me. "You could have let it go." "No," I said. "I couldn't." "Why?" "Because for once, I wanted to win without losing myself." She blinked. "Do you even want this house? Or did you just want to spite us?" I looked around at the half-painted banister, the sun filtering through the windows, the corner where I planned to put my writing desk. "I wanted this before you ever saw it," I said. "You just didn't know me well enough to see that." She stared at me for a moment longer, then turned and left without another word. The door closed behind her with a final click, and I exhaled. For the first time, I felt it. Not vindication. Not victory.
Peace.
It had been 3 days since Lana left my house without a word. 3 days of silence. Not from Kara. She checked in twice daily with memes and muffins. Not from the outside world. Project Willow was thriving, and the blog post had made it into a viral tweet thread titled, "When the Black Sheep Comes Back with a Deed." But from them, Adam, Judith, Lana, radio silence. It wasn't peace. It was pressure, waiting to detonate. And then it came. Not from Adam this time, but from Heather. Heather was our cousin, Judith's niece, the family's built-in gossip courier. The kind of woman who knew everyone's business before they did and disguised it all as concern. She called me that Thursday morning like nothing had happened. "Jenna, darling, how are you?" "I'm good, Heather. What's up?" She made a dramatic sigh. "I've been hearing things. About legal stuff, family drama, real estate. I just wanted to see how you're doing." "I'm managing just fine." "Of course you are. You always were the resilient one. Remember that art show in Brooklyn that got rained out? You still smiled through the entire disaster." That show had been a gutting failure. I lost money, my tent collapsed, and no one bought a single print. I'd cried on the subway all the way home. But of course, Heather saw it as charming boho trivia. "Thanks," I said flatly. "Anyway," she continued, "I had lunch with Aunt Judith yesterday." She looked tired. She always looks tired when things aren't about her. Heather paused, probably sensing her usual tricks weren't working. "I think she feels a bit left out of your success." I scoffed. She wasn't interested in my struggle. Why should she benefit from my success? Maybe she just didn't know how to help. She knew. She just didn't want to. Heather sighed again. "You know, Adam's not himself lately. All this has really shaken him." I didn't realize a bruised ego qualified as a medical emergency. Another pause. Then she dropped the real reason for her call. "Judith's hosting a private dinner next weekend.
Just family.
No press, no cameras. She asked me to invite you." I almost laughed. "A peace summit at the palace. How quaint." "She's hoping to clear the air," Heather added. I pictured Judith arranging centerpieces while strategizing verbal traps. I could already hear her voice. We just want what's best for you, Jenna. It's time to let the past go. But part of me was curious. Not because I expected reconciliation, but because I wanted to see them squirm. I wanted to sit at that table and not flinch when they served manipulation with the salad. I'll come, I said. Heather sounded relieved, maybe even proud of herself. Wonderful. I'll send the details. The dinner was scheduled for Saturday night at Judith's estate. A sprawling colonial she'd inherited from her father and never stopped reminding us was old money. I hadn't stepped foot in it since my cancer diagnosis, since the day I sat across from her on that velvet sofa and asked for help, only to be met with a clinical smile and a list of reasons why it wasn't a good time. On the day of the dinner, I wore a navy blue dress I'd bought with my first real royalty check. Simple, elegant, powerful. I arrived 5 minutes late on purpose and parked in the driveway, right behind Adam's luxury SUV. The door opened before I could knock. Judith stood there in a silk blouse and her signature pearls. Her smile was polite and tight. Jenna. Mother. We exchanged the kind of hug politicians give at photo ops. Her perfume was, as I remembered, sharp, expensive, invasive. Inside, the table was set with silverware that probably cost more than my car. Adam stood near the fireplace, sipping scotch. Lana was perched on a bar stool, scrolling on her phone like she hadn't trespassed on my porch just days ago. They all looked up when I walked in. Adam's eyes narrowed slightly. Lana didn't look up at all. Heather fluttered over, beaming. So glad you made it. I sat at the far end of the table, opposite Judith. A strategic position, close enough to hear the bullets, far enough to duck them. Dinner began. Small talk. Comments about the weather. Local real estate trends. I played along, sipping wine and smiling at all the right moments. But I could feel it building. Judith's need to steer the conversation, to corral the room back under her reign. It didn't take long. I read your article, she said finally between bites of salmon. Oh, I replied lightly. It was passionate. I smiled. Thanks. You've always had a flair for drama. There's nothing dramatic about truth. Adam chimed in, his voice sharp. You embarrassed the family, Jenna. I turned to him.
No.
I embarrassed you. There's a difference. Lana finally looked up. You made us look like villains. I didn't make you anything. I told my story. If you saw yourselves in the antagonists, maybe ask why. Judith set her fork down. We brought you here tonight to find a way forward. I leaned back in my chair. That's rich. You had no use for me when I was drowning. Now that I've built a raft, suddenly you want a seat. This isn't about money, Judith said tightly. Of course it is, I said, matching her tone. It always has been. Adam stood. Let's cut the performance. What do you want, Jenna? A public apology? A payout? You've made your point. I stood too. What I want, I said slowly, is for you to realize you don't control me anymore. I looked at Judith. You can't guilt me. I looked at Lana. You can't intimidate me. Then Adam. And you sure as hell can't sue me into silence. The room was silent. And I felt it again, that clarity. I walked toward the door, heels clicking like punctuation. Before I left, I turned. I didn't buy that house to hurt you, I said. I bought it because I survived something that almost killed me. And I decided that if I ever got another chance, I'd live loud. I'd take up space. And I'd stop waiting for permission to want things. None of them spoke. So I opened the door, walked into the night, and never looked back. Outside, the air was crisp.
Clear.
I stood by my car, breathing in the silence. And then my phone buzzed. A new message. From a name I hadn't seen in years.
Dad.
2 words. Saw the article. 3 more. Can we talk? I stared at the text for so long. The screen dimmed and locked. Can we talk? 3 words that once would have meant everything. That still, even now, landed like a punch to the stomach. I hadn't heard from my father in nearly 7 years. Not since the awkward lunch at a freeway diner where he spent half the time on his phone and the other half talking about his new life, his new wife, his new house, his new stepkids. He didn't ask much about me. Didn't ask about my health, my work, or how it felt to lose everything while he posted pictures of his boat on Facebook. And when I emailed him a year later about the cancer diagnosis, he never responded.
Until now.
I read the text again. Saw the article. Can we talk? I didn't answer. Not immediately. Instead, I drove home, my home, through the winding streets of a neighborhood I'd only ever dreamed of living in, my mind a maze of questions. What could he possibly want? Closure? Forgiveness? A chapter in the redemption arc he hadn't earned? That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, curled up on the old couch with a blanket, and reread the text one more time. Then I typed a response. Maybe. Call me tomorrow at 10 a.m. I didn't sleep much. My mind kept replaying memories I thought I'd buried. Him teaching Adam to ride a bike while I watched from the window. His shadow in the doorway the night he told us he was leaving. The click of his suitcase wheels across the tile. Judith's expression afterward, blank and composed, like heartbreak was something only weak people displayed. At 10:03 the next morning, my phone rang. Dad flashed across the screen. I answered. Hi, I said cautiously. Jenna, he breathed, like he wasn't sure I'd actually pick up. Thank you for answering. I said nothing. I read the article. Twice, he added. I didn't know you were going through all of that. You did, I said calmly. You just didn't ask. Silence on the other end. You ignored the email, I added. He paused. I didn't know what to say. I felt like I didn't have the right to say anything. But you had the right to walk away. To start over with a new family. To disappear when I needed you most. There it was. The thing I hadn't said out loud in years. I'm sorry, he said, voice thick. I was a coward. I let that hang in the air. I'm not calling to fix things, he continued. I know I can't undo the past. I wanted you to know I'm proud of you. What you've built. What you've survived. I had no idea. You didn't want to know, I said. It was easier to stay gone. You're right. Another silence. Then, carefully, would you be open to meeting? No pressure. Just a coffee. Or lunch. You choose. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to scream no. To reject him like he'd rejected me. But another part, the part that still believed in healing, in unlikely new beginnings, whispered, you're strong enough now to face it, even if nothing comes of it. I'll think about it, I said. That's all I can ask. After the call, I sat on the back steps and stared at the yard I'd barely touched since moving in. A small space with a patchy lawn, tangled rose bushes, and an old bench shaded by a crooked tree. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And it reminded me that some things, like gardens and old wounds, only flourish with slow, patient work. Later that week, I got an email from a literary agent. Subject: let's talk about a memoir. She'd read the blog article, seen the viral video clip, and wanted to discuss the possibility of a book deal. Your story has power, she wrote. And there's an audience waiting for it. I forwarded it to Kara with the subject line, is this real life? Her response came 5 seconds later.
Yes.
Yes, it is. And we're buying a dining table to celebrate. The following Saturday, Kara came over with a car full of furniture donations and one particularly hideous pink flamingo lawn ornament for the vibes. We spent the day arranging things in the living room, stringing up twinkle lights along the porch railing, and finally sitting down at a real table to eat something that wasn't from a paper bag. I never thought I'd see the day, Kara said, biting into her veggie wrap. You in a house. With throw pillows and everything. Neither did I. She looked at me, her smile softening. I'm proud of you, you know. I swallowed hard. Thank you. For sticking around. Even when I was disappearing into my own mess. Always. You're stuck with me now. That night, I found a letter in the mailbox. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of stationery in Judith's handwriting. Jenna, you have made your choices. I hope they serve you well. We are moving forward without further entanglement. This will be our last correspondence. Judith Waters. I stared at the words, feeling nothing. No ache. No anger. Just clarity. The Queen had spoken. She was cutting me out. And for the first time, I didn't feel cut down. I felt free. I folded the letter in half and placed it in a drawer I rarely opened. Not to keep it, but to remind myself that not all goodbyes are tragedies. Some are escape routes. The funny thing about closure is that it doesn't always feel like a door slamming shut. Sometimes it's a soft click. Sometimes it's a deep breath in an empty room. After Judith's letter, things shifted. Not dramatically. There were no fireworks or grand reconciliations, but like the slow turning of a tide. No more calls. No more messages. No more surprise visits or legal threats. Just quiet. And while part of me expected grief to sneak in, it didn't. What came instead was a steady kind of peace. The kind you feel when you finally stop waiting to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. In that silence, I began to build. The house started taking shape, bit by bit, like a painting with its underlayers finally drying. I painted the kitchen a shade of warm green I'd mix myself. Installed open shelving. Replaced the harsh overhead lighting with soft vintage pendants I found at a thrift store in the next town over. On Saturdays, I'd walk down to the farmer's market for fresh bread and flowers. I introduced myself to neighbors, many of whom already knew me from the article. Most were kind. A few were curious. Some were suspicious of how I could afford this place, how I'd landed on my feet so fast. But I didn't mind. Let them wonder. The truth had already been told, and for once, I didn't need to defend it. Kara and I turned the spare bedroom into a creative studio. She brought over a desk she'd found on Facebook Marketplace, and I filled the walls with my favorite sketches. I started painting again, not for clients, but for myself. Sometimes I'd lose hours in that room. Music playing low, the smell of turpentine curling through the air like a memory. It felt like reclaiming something I'd buried during the worst of the bankruptcy. The part of me that believed art could still be more than survival. Then one Tuesday afternoon, the email came. Subject: Clara the Courageous Cat, Film Rights Inquiry. I clicked it with trembling fingers. A small but reputable animation studio in Vancouver wanted to option the book. They were planning a limited series about animals overcoming adversity, and Clara had deeply resonated with their producers. I reread the email 3 times. And then I burst out laughing. That little story I'd written during chemo, curled up on a rented couch, bald and exhausted, was about to become a cartoon. I forwarded the email to my agent. She responded with 15 exclamation points and a contract draft already in progress. That night, Kara came over with champagne and a frozen pizza. To Clara, she said, raising her glass. To redemption arcs, I added. To buying your nemesis's dream house, surviving cancer, and turning your trauma into animated joy. We clinked glasses and ate on the living room floor, just like we used to when we were broke 20-somethings in a crumbling apartment. Except now, everything was different. Because I owned the floor. Later that week, I finally agreed to meet my father. We chose a neutral place, a small cafe by the lake with mismatched chairs and the best honey oat scones I'd ever tasted. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at an outdoor table with 2 coffees and a napkin folded precisely in front of him. His hair was grayer, his shoulders smaller. The kind of aging that happens when you live a comfortable life without much confrontation. "Hi," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. He smiled, tentative. "Hi." We sat in silence for a moment, the lake wind tossing leaves across the sidewalk. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "Neither was I." I read the blog post. And the article. And I watched the luncheon video. I raised an eyebrow. "You've been busy." "I needed to understand," he said. "I miss so much." "You left," I said simply. "And you stayed gone." "I know. I needed you," I said. "Not the check you sent every December."
You.
His face crumpled just a bit. "I thought you were better off without me." That's the thing about parenting, I said. It's not about what you think. It's about showing up. He nodded. I know I failed you. We sipped our coffee in silence. The breeze carried the scent of pine and fresh pastries. I'm not here for a clean slate, I said. I'm not looking to rebuild something that never existed. But I'm open to maybe figuring out who we are now, as adults. He looked surprised, then grateful. I'd like that. We didn't hug when we left, but he touched my shoulder briefly. And somehow, that felt more honest than a dozen apologies. A week later, I stood in the living room of my house, our house, as Kara had started calling it, and stared at a piece of paper I hadn't expected to see. It was from the real estate agent. An offer. An actual, legitimate offer. Not from Adam this time, but from a family, a couple with 2 kids who had fallen in love with the house after seeing it online. They had tracked down the address from a social media post and sent an offer just in case you'd ever consider selling. The amount? Double what I paid. I stared at the paper for a long time. Then I walked to the bay window, sat on the bench I'd built myself, and let the afternoon light wash over me. It wasn't about the money. It was about the fact that someone else saw this place the way I did, not as a symbol of revenge or spite, but as a dream made real. A safe place. A beginning. I didn't accept the offer, but I did write them a note. Thank you. But this house is already spoken for. It's strange how life begins to settle once the chaos finally stops knocking at your door. A month passed. No lawsuits. No letters. No concerned family members checking in with thinly veiled gossip. Judith held firm on her cold silence. Adam disappeared into whatever corporate cave he sulked in when things didn't go his way. Lana stopped posting cryptic quotes about betrayal and redirected her energy into charity brunches and baby shower selfies. And me? I kept building. The memoir deal went through. The working title? Brushstrokes and Bankruptcy. A story of loss, paint, and petty triumph. My agent loved it. So did the editor. I laughed the first time I saw my own name in a publishing mock-up. Jenna Waters in bold type. The girl who once begged to illustrate someone else's words now had her own. And not just her story, but her voice. I spent my mornings writing in the sunroom with coffee and a playlist of lo-fi jazz. My afternoons were for painting or editing or answering interview questions about Clara the courageous cat. I told the truth in those interviews, the real truth, about how I used to cry between treatments, about losing more than just money when I filed for bankruptcy, about how silence from your family can be louder than any scream. But I never painted them as villains. I didn't have to. Reality, when spoken plainly, is its own form of indictment. Then came the letter from Ethan. Not a lawyer, not a journalist. Ethan Waters, my cousin. 17, awkward, brilliant, and chronically underestimated by the rest of the family. He found my address through Heather, who, shockingly, had started texting me weekly. Baby steps. The letter was handwritten on lined notebook paper. His penmanship was messy, like he hadn't yet figured out how to slow his brain down to match his hand. Dear Jenna, I hope it's okay that I wrote. I know things are weird with the family, but I just wanted to say I thought your article was amazing. I read it twice. I never knew any of that. You always seemed cool to me. Like weird cool. Not like Lana's yoga studio cool. Real cool. You made me want to try writing again. Also, I think it's epic that you bought their dream house. No one says that at dinner, but they're still mad about it. I heard Lana tell Adam she thinks you cast a spell on the place. LOL. Anyway, thanks for making me feel like it's okay to be different. If you ever want help with your book or need a teenager to test your animated show ideas on, I volunteer. Ethan, the tall one who hates squash and piano recitals. I cried reading it. Big, grateful, ugly tears. Then I wrote him back. 2 pages. Front and back. I told him he was more courageous than most adults I knew. That creativity was a gift, not a liability. And that he could write to me anytime he wanted, no matter what the family said. On a breezy Friday in October, I hosted my first ever dinner in the house. Nothing formal. Just Kara, her husband and daughter, and a couple of friends from the indie publishing world. We lit candles, grilled vegetables on the back patio, and ate off mismatched plates I'd collected from thrift shops and estate sales. Everyone brought something.
Wine. Pie.
Stories. Kara's daughter, Maisie, wore fairy wings and called the backyard Jenna's magic garden, even though it was mostly dead grass and one resilient rose bush. At one point, as twilight settled over the yard, Kara leaned over and said, "This feels like something permanent." "What does?"
This. You.
"The house. The life you've built." I looked around. String lights swayed gently above us. The smell of cinnamon and garlic hung in the air. Laughter bubbled from the table. Someone had started a game of cards. Music trickled from the kitchen window. And I realized she was right. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was waiting to be evicted, emotionally, financially, or otherwise. This was mine. Not because I'd bought it, but because I'd earned it. Every inch of peace. Every square foot of safety. Every right to exist loudly in a space without explanation. Later that night, after everyone left and the dishes were stacked in the sink, I stepped out onto the front porch. The sky was clear, the moon bold. And I saw them. Adam and Lana. Standing across the street, half-shadowed under a streetlight. Watching. I froze for a second, not in fear, but surprise. They didn't move, just stared. For a moment, I considered turning back inside. But something in me changed. I walked down the steps, crossed the lawn barefoot, and stopped at the edge of the sidewalk. They were close enough now to see clearly. Adam looked tired, older. Lana looked thinner, sharper somehow, like grief, without context. "What are you doing here?" I asked calmly. They exchanged a glance. Lana spoke first. "We were just passing through." "Uh-huh." Adam stepped forward. "You really made this place yours." I said nothing. "You always wanted it, didn't you?" he asked. "Even before Lana." I nodded once. "Before any of you even noticed it existed." He looked down, then back up. "I was wrong to say what I did at the gala." "That's the first thing you've said that isn't a performance."
Lana looked at me then.
Her eyes weren't cold, just tired. "I thought you were trying to take something from us," she said. "I wasn't," I replied. "I was just taking something for me." They both nodded. It wasn't a reconciliation. It wasn't a reunion. It was recognition. And maybe that was enough. They turned and walked away. I watched until their silhouettes disappeared into the dark. Then I went back inside, locked the door, and sat on the floor with my back against the wood. The house was quiet again. But it no longer felt like a hiding place. It felt like a starting line. Autumn came hard and fast. Leaves blazed gold, then dropped like feathers all over the street. Willow Lane transformed into something out of a storybook, crimson trees lining the sidewalks, porches decked out in pumpkins and dried corn stalks. And there, nestled halfway down the lane, was my house. My house. Every time I thought the novelty would wear off, it didn't. I'd wake up, pad across the hardwood floors in my socks, make coffee in my kitchen, and think, "This is mine. I did this." It wasn't pride. It was relief. The kind that sinks deep into your bones when you stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. The kind that lets you exhale after years of holding your breath. I finished the first draft of my memoir on a rainy Wednesday. Clara the Courageous Cat was already in pre-production, and the animation studio had sent over early sketches of Clara riding a bike, wearing her little yellow cape. I cried when I saw them. Not because they were cute, though they were, but because I remembered where Clara had come from. From the hospital bed. From fear. From that voice inside me whispering, "Tell it anyway, even if no one reads it." Now, Clara had a cape and a production team. And I had 70,000 words that told the truth about everything. The illness, the shame, the bankruptcy, the way my family had weaponized love, and how I'd learned to live outside their orbit. Kara read it in one sitting. She showed up the next day with an annotated copy and tears in her eyes. People are going to see themselves in this, she whispered. And they're going to feel less alone because you wrote it. I nodded, but I wasn't thinking about the readers, not yet. I was thinking about Ethan. My cousin, the misfit boy who wrote me letters on college-ruled paper. I sent him an early copy. He emailed me 2 days later. Finished it in the school library. I had to fake a nosebleed so the others wouldn't see me crying. Jenna, it's going to change people. I cried again. That seemed to be my thing now. Crying not from sorrow, but from the sheer weight of feeling understood after years of isolation. Around Halloween, something unexpected happened. I received a voicemail from Judith. Her voice was tight, formal, like someone recording a message for a teleprompter.
Jenna.
I heard from Heather that you're writing a book. I also saw the teaser for Clara. Congratulations. A pause. I may not have expressed it well in the past, but I never wanted you to feel unsupported. I know it's too late for some things. I hope it's not too late for everything.
Click.
No request. No demand. Just that. A crack in the ice. I didn't call her back. Not right away. Instead, I sat in the studio, turned the voicemail into a soundwave sketch, and painted over it in layers of crimson, ochre, and deep purple. I titled it, Almost an Apology. That same week, I submitted the final draft of the manuscript. The publisher sent a mock-up of the cover, my silhouette in the bay window, warm light spilling out behind me, brush in hand. Not my face, just a version of my shape, solitary but grounded. I approved it without edits. Because it was enough. A week later, Heather invited me to brunch. This time, it wasn't at a country club or a penthouse or a curated cafe. It was at her house. A modest colonial just 20 minutes away. Real toys scattered in the living room. Dishes in the sink. A dog barking in the background. It was the first time I'd been invited into her space since we were kids. I didn't know how to be a sister, she admitted as she poured me coffee. I only knew how to compete. You were raised to. She nodded. But I'm trying now. My therapist says it's never too late to learn. I smiled. She sounds smart. We talked for 2 hours. About her kids. About mine. The books, the house, the manuscript. She confessed she'd unfollowed Judith on social media. She started using her memoir title in casual conversations, she said, rolling her eyes. Like it was her idea. Of course she did. Does Adam ever talk about me? I asked, not out of curiosity, but because I was ready to hear the answer. Heather hesitated. Not directly, she said, but I think he's embarrassed. Not by you, by himself. He keeps saying things like, Jenna always had a chip on her shoulder. But the way he says it now, he sounds less angry, more defensive. I nodded. He'll never apologize.
No.
But I think he knows he lost something. That night, as I drove home, I passed the new bakery that had opened on Willow Lane. The window displayed cupcakes topped with tiny frosting houses. A sign in the window said, now featuring Clara's Courageous Cupcake. I parked, went in, and bought one. The barista recognized me. You're her, she whispered. The book lady. I laughed.
Guilty.
You're kind of famous around here. I smiled. Only in a 3-block radius. I sat outside, eating the cupcake under the string lights. And for a moment, I thought about 10-year-old me, drawing her dream house in the margins of math tests. Scolded for doodling, for not focusing, for being too much and not enough all at once. I wished I could tell her. You'll make it. You'll be misunderstood and underestimated. You'll get sick. You'll go broke. But you'll survive. And one day, you'll live in the house you drew. Not because someone handed it to you, but because you built it with paint, pain, and persistence. I wiped a crumb from my lip, laughed at my own poetic streak, and went home. To my house. To myself. The first snowfall came early that year. It wasn't much, just a delicate dusting that clung to rooftops and curled into gutters. But when I stepped out onto the porch that morning and saw the flakes drifting down, something inside me paused. Like the world was holding its breath. Winter, I realized, would be different this time. Not like last year, when I'd spent December juggling overdue bills and dodging calls from creditors. Not like the year before, when chemo left me so exhausted I couldn't finish wrapping Ethan's birthday gift. This year, for the first time in a long time, the cold didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a beginning. December brought a whirlwind of activity. The memoirs pre-orders opened and exploded. Bookstores requested signed copies. An NPR affiliate reached out for an interview. I nearly dropped my phone when I saw an email with the subject line, Oprah's Book Club, interested in advance copy. And yet, through it all, I stayed grounded. Maybe it was the house. Maybe it was Kara, who kept me humble with texts like, don't let fame ruin your laundry habits. Or, you still owe me that lasagna recipe, celebrity. Or maybe it was because I'd finally learned that success, real success, isn't about who claps for you. It's about whether you still feel like yourself when the applause dies down. One chilly evening, I got a call from Ethan, my cousin, not the cat. Jenna, he said breathlessly, my English teacher is making us write about personal heroes, and I picked you. I hope that's okay. I felt my throat tighten. It's more than okay. I said you're the reason I started writing. That being brave doesn't always look like fighting. Sometimes it's just telling the truth even when people don't want to hear it. I closed my eyes. You're going to be someone amazing, Ethan.
You already are.
Before we hung up, he added, I asked Mom if we could visit you over winter break. She said yes. I smiled. Tell her I'll bake cookies. You bake. Badly. I'll bring snacks. 2 days later, Kara and I stood in my living room decorating a lopsided Christmas tree we'd hauled from the town square. You know, she said, stringing lights through a stubborn branch, I think this year might be the first holiday you're not fighting to keep your head above water. I know, I replied. It's weird. You get used to peace, she said. Eventually. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it slowly. Judith stood on the porch. Her coat was navy. Her gloves leather. But her face was bare in a way I'd never seen. Not just makeup-free. Stripped of the performance. She held a small white envelope. I was in the neighborhood, she said, and then actually had the grace to look sheepish. I raised an eyebrow. You were in a neighborhood you refused to acknowledge existed for years? She nodded. Fair. A beat of silence passed. I came to say I read your book, she said. Or the galley. Heather gave it to me. I braced myself. I expected to feel attacked, she continued. But what I felt was something else. What?
Sad, she said.
That I never really knew you. Not the way I thought I did. Her voice trembled slightly. I'm not here to beg for forgiveness, she added. But I wanted you to have this. She held out the envelope. I took it cautiously, half expecting it to be a legal threat or a subtle manipulation. It wasn't. It was a letter. Not typed. Not curt. Handwritten. Jenna.
You were right.
About everything I didn't say. About everything I should have. I was so busy trying to preserve appearances that I forgot how to actually love someone.
You didn't disappoint me.
I disappointed myself. If this is goodbye, I understand. But if it's not, I hope we can try.
Mom.
I looked up. Judith stood still, her chin lifted like she was bracing for rejection. I'm not ready, I said quietly. But maybe someday. She nodded, blinking rapidly. Happy holidays, she said, then turned and walked back to her car. Inside, Kara asked, do I need to get the wine? Maybe just the cookies. Christmas Eve arrived wrapped in snow and silence. I spent the morning baking burned sugar cookies with Ethan and his little sister while Heather snapped photos and tried to keep the sprinkles contained. We lit candles, played board games, watched Clara's animated teaser on my laptop, which made all 3 kids squeal with joy. Even Heather teared up. It's not just a cartoon, she said. It's healing. Later that night, after they'd gone home and the house was quiet again, I sat by the fireplace and opened the last box I'd never unpacked. It was full of old sketchbooks, doodles from college, paintings from my early gallery days. Even a few notes from my dad, written back when he still showed up sometimes. At the bottom, I found a photo of Adam and me. We were kids, standing side by side in front of Judith's hydrangeas. I was holding a box of sidewalk chalk. He was in a blazer. I looked like I belonged to a different family entirely. But we were smiling. It didn't feel bitter to look at it now. Just honest. Like a page from a story that had moved on to a new chapter. I placed it back in the box and slid it under the bed. That night, I stepped out onto the porch. Snow flurries drifted through the air, soft as memory. I sipped cider from a chipped mug and looked up at the house, my house, wrapped in soft lights and the warmth of something real.
Kara was right.
You do get used to peace. Eventually. And once you do, you never let anyone steal it again. Spring came early. By March, crocuses were already peeking through the soil around the porch. The first daffodils bloomed in April, lining the sidewalk like little gold medallions. The once silent backyard now buzzed with life. Birds nesting in the crooked oak, squirrels darting across the fence, even a neighborhood cat that sometimes lounged in a sunbeam near the shed. I'd named him Scout. He came and went like he owned the place, which, if I'm honest, made me like him even more. Inside, the house had finally settled into itself. It wasn't just painted and furnished. It was lived in. There were coffee rings on the kitchen counter, muddy shoe prints by the front door, and half-read books in every room. My studio overflowed with canvases and half-finished illustrations. Clara the Courageous Cat was officially in production, and the team had just sent over early voiceover auditions. It was surreal. All of it. But the part that stunned me most? How ordinary it started to feel. The trauma, the betrayal, the bitterness, they weren't gone. But they weren't steering anymore. I had put them in the back seat, and I didn't need them to fuel me. Not anymore. One Thursday afternoon, I got a text from Kara. "You near your house?" I replied, "It's mine, remember?" She showed up 15 minutes later with a bottle of champagne and a huge cardboard envelope. "What's this?" I asked. She grinned. "Just a little gift." I opened it. Inside was a framed photo, a screenshot, actually, from my first bookstore event just 2 weeks earlier. Me, sitting on a stool, holding a mic, laughing. Behind me was a poster of the book cover, brushstrokes and bankruptcy. And below the photo, Kara had added a caption. "The girl they underestimated bought the house. Then she built a life no one could take."
I stared at it for a long time.
Then I hugged her.
Hard.
The following week, something unexpected happened. Adam called. No cryptic texts. No lawyers. No third-party emails. Just a call. I let it go to voicemail, more out of instinct than hesitation. His voice was quieter than I remembered, less polished.
"Hey."
"I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, and I wouldn't blame you if you deleted this. But I just wanted to say I'm sorry." A pause. "You were right. About all of it. I was cruel. I was wrong. I let my ego make me into something I'm not proud of. And it cost me more than I realized." Another pause. "I'm trying to fix things. Not with you. That's not my right to ask for, but with myself. And if you ever want to talk, or yell, or laugh, or just sit in a room and pretend we're not related, I'm here."
Click. I sat with that for a while.
I didn't know what to do with it. But for once, I didn't feel the pressure to do anything. His guilt wasn't mine to manage. His apology wasn't a debt I needed to forgive. It was enough to know he'd said it. May arrived like a poem. Warm, slow, full of promise. I spent my mornings writing new children's stories, some about brave animals, others about quiet kids who didn't fit in until they realized that not fitting in was a kind of magic. I painted more than ever, hosted writing workshops in the studio, even started a newsletter just for fun, where I shared essays and sketches and the occasional burnt cookie recipe. And then, on the first Sunday of the month, something wonderful happened. Heather showed up with her kids and a casserole. Thomas, my dad, brought gardening gloves and said he wanted to plant tulips along the fence. Kara brought wine. Ethan brought a short story he'd written in school. He asked if I'd illustrate it. I said yes. And we sat there, on mismatched chairs and blankets, under the shade of a tree that once felt like a stranger, talking, laughing, eating too much potato salad. At one point, Heather looked around and said, "It feels like a new family." I looked at her, at Ethan, at Kara, at my dad, who had dirt under his fingernails and a quiet, hopeful expression on his face. And I said, "It is." That night, I sat on the front steps with a cup of tea, Scout the cat curled at my feet, and the stars blinking quietly above the rooftops. I thought about how far I'd come. From the hospital bed, from the bankruptcy court, from the gala where Adam used my lowest moment as a punchline. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who thought love had to be earned, and that success only mattered if someone else validated it. She still lived in me, but she wasn't scared anymore. She wasn't waiting for rescue. She had rescued herself.
And now?
She was living in the house she once drew in the margins of homework assignments. She was holding hands with the life she chose. And she wasn't letting go. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or written off, just know, you are more than their version of you. You are more than the worst thing that's happened to you. And your comeback doesn't need to be loud or flashy. It just needs to be yours. Because sometimes, the best revenge is not proving them wrong. It's proving to yourself that you were right all along. Yellow Heart.
Jenna.